Next up here on WrestleMania Best to Worst, we go over the Intercontinental Championship matches that have taken place over WrestleMania's history. Although, point of interest, if you've been watching my videos for any length of time, you've heard me, actually, if you watched my World Heavyweight Championship portion of WrestleMania Best to Worst, you know I made the comment that the World Heavyweight title that existed for those WrestleManias was not the same championship that was held in WCW and all of that stuff. That's a completely different lineage. They just used the same design for the artifact, which is the championship belt. But they just because they gave it the same name and the same belt design doesn't mean it's the same championship. That lineage was merged into the WWF championship when Jericho won both belts. But yeah, it's funny. You could actually make a similar argument for the Intercontinental title because I had completely forgotten about this, but somebody brought it up to me that the Intercontinental Championship had actually been merged or unified with the World Heavyweight title in 2002 when Kane and Triple H had that match that was centered around the Katie Vick angle, which is obviously why I don't remember it because I try to forget anything associated with that angle. But the original Intercontinental Championship was merged or unified with the World Heavyweight Championship, which eventually got merged back into the WWE Championship when Randy Orton beat John Cena in that TLC match, and the WWE Championship had already had the WCW title lineage merged into it, and actually the World Heavyweight title along with the IC title it also had the European and Hardcore titles merged into it, so it's like there's 80 different championships merged into the current WWE World Heavyweight Championship, which is actually kind of funny. But so the Intercontinental title that currently exists today has only been in existence since 2003. It's a different championship, different lineage. But if we want to get into specifics and be totally anal about it, which I tend to do, that's the state of things right now. But this list is going to account for all of the Intercontinental Championship matches that have occurred in WrestleMania's history, going back to the original run prior to the brand split. The Intercontinental title was regularly featured at WrestleMania. Out of the first 18, it was defended at 17 of the first 18 WrestleManias. The lone exception being WrestleMania 12, where I believe Goldust was the champion, and he was wrapped up with Roddy Piper in the Hollywood Backlot Brawl, and the title wasn't on the line because that was basically a non-sanctioned match. So, yeah, but other than that, the Intercontinental title had been defended at all of the earlier WrestleManias pre-brand split in 2002. After the brand split, and as we go into the late 2000s and the 2010s or whatever, the Intercontinental title has only been defended 3 times at WrestleMania. And none of those 3 matches were any kind of significant role. Actually, the latter match we got last year was the most significant IC title match since 18. Since the original run of the IC title, and that wasn't even that significant of a match, as I've already discussed. It was just kind of an excuse to do spots and put a belt on Daniel Bryan so people feel good. But it wasn't like a grand planned or this excellent crafted storyline or whatever to create an epic match to center the title around. But so the standing of the Intercontinental Championship has really fallen over the years. It doesn't play the same role at WrestleMania that it used to. And what it used to do, it used to, in some cases, offer a big match, whether it be a semi-main event or a very high-caliber championship match to feature on the undercard. Or in other cases, it's an excuse to showcase a guy that's eventually going to be built up to the main event level. Savage was in Intercontinental title matches before ultimately moving up to the main event. Ultimate Warrior was in a WrestleMania IC title match before main eventing the next year. Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, The Rock even had the IC title match at 2 WrestleManias in a row. And you actually see the development of The Rock over those 2 WrestleManias. It's almost staggering how much he changed in that year's time. But yeah, the IC title, it does serve as that function, and it's important to make the second-tier championship important for various reasons. One, you want and yes, the belts are props, and yes, the championships technically aren't real, but they're real within the context of this universe that's being created, and you want the prizes to mean something. You want the prizes to matter, because if they don't matter, why the hell would anybody even go for them? Or why even bother going after them? And, in a lot of cases in WrestleMania's early, especially in the earlier days, out of 20 championship matches, if I've got my counting right, yes, there are 20 IC title matches in WrestleMania's history. Some of those earlier ones were great examples of creating really special, WrestleMania matches, or just great showcases for great talents that would eventually move up and do greater things later on. So the second-tier championship is important, and the IC title, it has played all sorts of roles in WrestleMania's history. It's been in triple threat matches, it's been in singles matches, it's been in four-way matches, it's been in middle of the card, it's been in a main event even, it's opened up the show a couple of times, it's been in ladder matches and all sorts of things. So very versatile, and I think that a lot of that comes from the IC title, at least my earlier, when I first started watching, my kind of understanding of the IC title is that the main event belt, the World Heavyweight title, was kind of the stars went for that belt. Those were like the big epic characters and over-the-top personalities, and those are the ones that went for the main event level. The IC title was the workhorse belt, and that was where the best actual athletic exhibitions were for the Intercontinental title, and that's where you got the Bretts and the Shawns and the Mr. Perfects and guys like that. And the main event World Heavyweight title was more for guys like the Hogans and the Warriors. Obviously, that line is blurred over the years, and there's not really as much of a distinction, which may have contributed to why the IC title has been fallen to the wayside. Although, to be fair, in 2016, the IC title is better now than it has been in recent years. Not great, but it's better than it has been. But with that, let's pay the IC Championship some credit and go over its WrestleMania history. And like I said, we're going from best to worst here. And starting off, number one, my pick for the greatest Intercontinental title match in WrestleMania history is also the greatest ladder match in WrestleMania history. Razor Ramon versus Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 10. I already talked about this match in terms of what it meant to ladder matches, but as far as the IC title goes, this is a prime example of creating an epic storyline to make this championship really matter. The storyline was so good, with Shawn being suspended and stripped of the title for reasons that were, personal trouble and conflicts with the company, and Razor ended up winning the interim championship in Shawn's absence. But you had this controversy that hadn't been addressed. When Shawn eventually came back, he came back with his version of the IC title, the title belt, and claimed to be the true Intercontinental Champion. So it was a perfect way to do this IC title match at WrestleMania, and WrestleMania was the perfect stage to have a match like this. Not only from the gimmick match standpoint of having all these amazing visuals associated with the ladder, but just to settle this big controversy of who is the true Intercontinental Champion. It's interesting because the World Heavyweight title, the WWE title at this particular WrestleMania, had a similar controversy where you had Bret and Lex Luger both winning the Royal Rumble, and you didn't know who the true number one contender was. So it's actually interesting mirroring there of what was going on with the main event, where both major titles had controversies setting up their WrestleMania matches. And that's kind of interesting, probably unintended, but interesting all the same. And, it's one of the more memorable, more high-profile Intercontinental title matches in WrestleMania's history as a result. And it deserves to be loved and celebrated and all the praise that it gets. And, the second video in this series where it places number one. That's how good it is. And it's actually going to come up again in the Shawn Michaels video. So how high will it rank in that one? You shall see. Number two, again, no surprise to anybody, Randy Savage versus Ricky Steamboat from WrestleMania 3. Again, really, and I've talked about this before in the past, it always kind of bothered me when people would say about this particular match that Hogan and Andre had the epic storyline that drew the crowd, and that was the more story-driven match, and this was the amazing athletic spectacle that stole the show. But and while that's true to a point, it sort of implies that it's sort of an oversimplification, because it sort of implies that there was no story to this match, and it was just kind of they just went out there and just did near fall after near fall after near fall, and just bounced around the ring and just had this amazing athletic display that got 93,000 people on their feet or whatever. And I'm I mean, yeah, they did, but this match also had the storyline to go along with it, with Ricky Steamboat getting hurt and Randy Savage using the ring bell to injure him, and they tied in George the Animal Steele from a previous feud that Savage had in the love triangle with Elizabeth, and Ricky Steamboat's eventual recovery and return to the ring set the stage for this epic rematch where Steamboat was going to try and get revenge on Savage, get revenge on him for hurting him, and do so by taking his championship title. It's again, it's a classic showdown, and they really did a great job of building anticipation for that match, and the payoff was beautiful. And this is one of those matches that really heightened the whole idea in my head that the IC title was the workhorse belt, because and this is where the divide between Hogan and Andre in this match really comes into play, where you didn't get matches like this from Hulk Hogan or anybody like that. These like fast-paced, breakneck speed, quick near falls in succession, and again, I've made this point before, back in those days, any one of those roll-ups could have been the finish, and that's why it was so exciting. Nowadays, it wouldn't work as well, and because you see people try to emulate it now, and instead of doing roll-ups, they just do giant flashy moves that they never beat anybody with. But back in those days, any one of those roll-ups could have been the finish, and that's what made it so exciting, and that because you didn't know when the finish was going to come. I don't know if that would translate well today. I don't know if it would. It should work, but like I said, I mean, the way things are booked now, it's kind of ruined. But this was just a style of match that American audiences, especially on this kind of level, were not really used to. And it just blew the doors open on what could be done in a wrestling match and what could be done for major championship matches, and even kind of opened eyes for a lot of people. It's like, this style of wrestling could probably work on a main event level as well. And it's no surprise that Randy Savage was main eventing WrestleMania the next year and would go on to be one of the biggest stars in wrestling history. And it's one of the most important, arguably the most important IC title match of all time, for a multitude of reasons. I mean, it changed the business in a lot of ways. And in addition to doing all that great athletic stuff and all the great, the great action and everything, they kept the story intact as well by doing the finish where Savage tried to injure Steamboat with the ring bell again, and George Steele pushed him off the top rope, and all that. So Ricky had to overcome all of those elements of the story and rise above it and ultimately win the championship. As actually a really nice finish too, where he rolled up, he countered a scoop slam into like a small package to secure the victory and ultimately win the championship. It's like I said, it's one of the most celebrated matches in WrestleMania's history. It was the first true WrestleMania classic, and it was done at the IC title level, which really puts the spotlight on the second tier championship. It was really a great one, and one of my personal favorites, and it always will be. Number 3 is actually the time that the IC title actually main evented WrestleMania. Hulk Hogan, the WWF champion, versus the Ultimate Warrior, the Intercontinental champion, in a title-for-title match in the main event of WrestleMania 6. This one counts. The Intercontinental title was on the line. I think, in the grand scheme of things, the IC title was really just there for window dressing. It felt like they didn't want to take the title off of Warrior, and they wanted to keep him looking strong to eventually get him to Hogan. And really just having both titles on the line was a way of like making both Hogan and Warrior look like equals, that they both were seemingly unbeatable in their respective divisions. Like Hogan couldn't be beaten in the main event level and Warrior couldn't be beaten at the IC title level. And it just kind of heightened how equal both men were. But in the grand scheme of things, I think most people obviously look at this as a WWF championship match and not so much an IC title. And like I said, the IC title there is just there for promotional reasons and to make it look sexier and cooler than it probably does. Again, especially in hindsight when the Warrior just forfeited the IC title after he won anyway. What was the point of making it title for title if he was just going to forfeit the IC title anyway? But still, it's the Intercontinental Championship main evented at a WrestleMania, sharing the spotlight with the main belt, obviously. But that's really big and that's really important. And I don't think anybody would think that would be possible nowadays. I mean, you look at the IC title as it exists now. I don't think anybody would buy that as like a main event level belt. They should think about getting their IC champions up to like close to that level so you can make some stellar main events out of it. They just haven't done that. But this is an important match for the in the history of the Intercontinental Championship because, like I said, it did get to main event of WrestleMania, and the only other championship that ever really got to do all of the things that the IC title did, whether it be opener, mid, and main event, was the World Heavyweight Championship, which would come about a few years later in 2002. But even that belt didn't get to, do ladder matches and all sorts of other things like that. So really, in a lot of ways, the IC title has been the most versatile in WrestleMania's entire history, and this match right here is a clear indicator of that. And obviously, it added a lot of credence to the IC Championship that the Intercontinental Champion beat Hulk Hogan. That was also a big deal. It kind of made us like, wow, this is a really important championship belt. And that kind of worked wonders for that particular championship, even though Warrior would end up forfeiting it not too long after that. But it's again one of the more significant IC title matches, even though that particular championship is kind of the secondary one in this particular main event. It had a role to play, and it really added nicely to this particular contest. Number 4, Roddy Piper versus Bret the Hitman Hart at WrestleMania 8. This one's a good one. This one, I love this one to death. It's my favorite match that Roddy Piper ever had. It was the match, to me, it was kind of Bret Hart's coming out party. I know everybody says that the match with Perfect at SummerSlam was. And yeah, I can see that. It was a really great match that he had against a really great worker in Mr. Perfect. But this was the one that really elevated Bret to like that upper level, I think. Because he's going up against a guy who's never straight up lost by pinfall before. Does beat him. Because, again, I don't remember ever seeing Piper lose by pinfall during his initial WWF run. And Bret's going up there against this guy. And beats him with that great finish. And Bret was one of my favorite finish guys in the history of wrestling. That great finish where Piper locks in the sleeper hold and Bret's got the blood coming down his face and he kicks off the corner and flips backward for this pinning combination to pin Piper's shoulder just down and get the 3 count. It was, this was just a great match. And kudos to Piper for going out of his way to make Bret look like $1 million. He played the heel in this match, which, the established main eventer playing the heel is kind of risky. Doing a match like this is risky because you're risking the up-and-coming babyface looking bad going up against, like, the main event star. And Piper, by playing the heel and making Bret as sympathetic as he did and really just helping him throughout the entire match really helped put Bret over big time. And I saw Bret in a completely different light after that because as a kid watching this for the first time, I was on Piper's side at the time because Piper was way cooler than Bret, right? And, they had done that I remember they did the whole thing where Bret got sick and had to forfeit the IC title to the Mountie, so he never really got beat for the belt, so it made sense that he would be in line to ultimately face Piper. Also weird. This was the only championship that Piper ever held. He eventually won the tag titles with Ric Flair, but that almost doesn't count in my eyes because it was at a time when the tag titles meant absolutely nothing, and they would put those belts on fucking anybody. But during the prime of his career, this was the only major championship that Piper ever held in the WWF, which is kind of surprising. But I guess when you're that over and you're that spectacular, you don't need a belt most of the time. I don't know, but this match was just great. I loved how violent it got. Again, adding some sympathy to Bret by having him bleed. He was the one that you felt bad for, and they did that terrific spot where Piper, again, going more heel in this match, was going to hit Bret with the ring bell, and Bret kind of gave him the puppy dog eyes, and was like, no, and the fans are all, booing and all that stuff, and they made Piper throw the belt away. Again, really great stuff, and Bobby Heenan's commentary, also hilarious during that whole bit. It's one of the finest IC title matches in WrestleMania's history, easily. And it's really, why is it not higher on the list? Because the other 3 matches above it are just that good. It's just one of those weird things. Really, the top 4 IC title matches here, any one of these could be number 1 on anybody's list, I think. That's how good they are. But moving right along to number 5, the IC title match from WrestleMania 5, The Ultimate Warrior versus Ravishing Rick Rude. This one, it was really great because this one kind of had the feel of a main event to it. It was really kind of a precursor to what Warrior would eventually become as this main event superstar, because the fans were totally into him in this match, and they were totally into this feud. And again, when you build the story and you build the feud, I remember they did the pose down at the Royal Rumble where Rude attacked Warrior during the pose down and left him laying, and that set the stage for this match at WrestleMania. And Rude, in a lot of ways, is the perfect opponent for Warrior, because not only is Rude a great character that can kind of interact with him, and he had such a great personality and great presentation and everything that he could make Warrior look like $1,000,000, because it's impossible not to cheer Warrior against that guy because he's such an asshole. But there's also that element of that Rick Rude was a damn good worker, and Warrior came off looking much better whenever he was in the ring with Rick Rude. Actually, their match at SummerSlam later that year is better than this one, like way better than this one. This one was really good, it had the heat of a main event to it. It really did feel like a big major match. And I like the way the match was worked, with Warrior kind of overpowering Rude and making him bump all over the place, where he threw Rude around like a rag doll. And they even did that spot where Rude was going for the Rude Awakening and Warrior kind of powered out of it, and then that was also a cool visual. And Rude just looked completely helpless in there against Warrior. And of course that sets up that fantastic finish where Bobby Heenan trips up Warrior on a suplex, and Rude falls on top of him, gets the 1-2-3, although the referee, I guess, didn't see Warrior's feet sticking out under the ropes. But a great cheating finish all the same. And it was really shocking to see Rude win the title. I was like, wow, you never would have expected him to beat Warrior. But it set the stage for an even better rematch at SummerSlam. And it's kind of gave Warrior an obstacle to overcome. And that worked out even better for him. Long term, and I guess it was good that they didn't keep the undefeated streak, because I'm pretty sure Warrior was undefeated up to that point, and they kept that, kind of got him away from that before it got too big for its britches, because that's part of what happened to Goldberg, is that the streak became almost bigger than him, and by the time the streak was over, it was like, okay, now what do we do with Goldberg? And so sometimes it's good to kind of get that out of the way before it becomes too much of a thing. But yeah, I really enjoyed this match. I think it's Warrior's a little green, and there's some elements of that in this match. But overall, I thought Rude made him look very, very good. It's really an indicator of how good Rick Rude really was, and I was happy for him that he got the title. He's one of those guys that deserved to win a belt, and he got it, and it was great. So yeah, good big match around a good feud. That's really all you can ask for in a match like this. Number 6, from WrestleMania 17, Chris Jericho versus William Regal. This one opened up this particular WrestleMania. I already talked about it in the opening match video. And yeah, it's a really good match between two guys of clashing styles that had been feuding on television up to that point. Jericho being the more flashier of the two, and Regal being the more down and dirty wrestling, pure finesse wrestling type. And I thought their styles meshed very well together. I already talked about the injury to Jericho's shoulder and how that played a role in the finish, where Jericho could not lock on the walls of Jericho fully, so he had to use the lion salt to beat him, which I really like. I like nice touches like that, and if you're going to do an injury, it should play some kind of a role in how the story of the match plays out. And far too often, I've made that point a million times before, but far too often the injury means nothing. So I always like it when they go that extra mile to kind of make it work. But yeah, it was just a really good match between two very talented workers that were actually embroiled in a pretty solid feud at the time, going into this particular WrestleMania, and actually would continue after this. I remember they had the Duchess of Queensberry rules match. I think it was at the next pay-per-view, which was kind of a ridiculous match, but we're not covering that one. Yeah, it was, of course, Jericho is one of the more prolific Intercontinental champions. At this point in the Attitude Era, Jericho was kind of like, he wasn't up to like that Rock, Austin, Triple H, Undertaker level, but he was kind of the next step down. And I'll actually talk about that in a couple entries. But yeah, Jericho, he was a good fit for the Intercontinental title. It was really kind of, in a lot of ways, kind of the key representative of the IC title during the Attitude Era. And I thought he did quite well. And this match was definitely an indicator of it. Number 7 from WrestleMania 7. It's almost like I planned it this way. Mr. Perfect versus the Big Bossman. Now, this one may seem a little strange for some people because it's not one of the more celebrated matches in WrestleMania's history, but I thought it was really good. It's got a lot of bells and whistles, but it made for like a wild and crazy match between two guys, again, of clashing styles. Perfect being the classical athletic wrestler, Bossman being more of a ground and pound big guy type who could really move. I mean, Bossman was, back in his heyday, was really athletic for a guy his size, and I thought they had a really good hot match with each other. Of course, this was also the payoff to another storyline where Bobby Heenan had insulted Big Bossman's mother. So Big Bossman wanted revenge on him, and he kind of went through all the members of the Heenan family to eventually get to the crown jewel, who was Mr. Perfect at WrestleMania. And Mr. Perfect, Curt Hennig, to me, was kind of like embodied the Intercontinental title as a kid. Like, to me, that was his championship. And again, he embodied all the things that I associated the Intercontinental title with. Like I said, the Intercontinental title was the workhorse belt, and I associated that with Mr. Perfect. He was kind of... he wasn't as cartoony as like some of the main eventers were, so he was more of a classical wrestling type. But he had a personality. That was the other thing. He was very, very charismatic and very hateable when he was playing the heel, which as he did here. So Perfect was really great. He was perfect for that role. And I thought he worked really well with Bossman here, and I thought they had a very nice match. Of course, another key aspect of this particular contest was that it was the last WrestleMania appearance of Andre the Giant. So that was a nice little add-on to this match to give it a little bit more of a spark. The finish came when Big Bossman looked like he'd had Mr. Perfect beat after Andre hit Perfect with the belt, because everybody was cheating at this point, so whatever. This match got bonkers towards the end. And before Bossman could capitalize on it, Haku and Barbarian ran down and caused the disqualification. So in the end, Bossman and Andre were able to beat up all the members of the Heenan family, send them running, but Perfect got away with the title. So you kind of got this thing where, all right, Bossman got his revenge, and he got to stand tall at the end and everything, but Perfect still kept the belt. So they saved the title change for later, while also giving some level of closure to the storyline and letting Bossman kind of go out on top at least a little bit. So it kind of worked out. The way they did it, it kind of worked out for everybody. And like I said, Andre being there made it seem a lot bigger. It made for a more exciting match. So this is kind of a forgotten gem that I always kind of I enjoyed watching. So that one's that. Number 8, another Attitude Era one. One of the only good matches from WrestleMania 2000. Kurt Angle defending both the Intercontinental and the European Championships against Chris Jericho and Chris Benoit in a 2-fall triple threat match with each title on the line in each fall. I talked about this earlier with Jericho, where he wasn't at that main event level during the Attitude Era, or at least at this point in the Attitude Era, but he was kind of the next step down in terms of how popular he was and how he fit in the pecking order. Benoit and Angle were right there with him at that same level, and obviously they would all eventually make it to the main event level. But yeah, these were like the 3 guys, if you're going to do a match like this with the second tier championships on the line, these are the 3 best guys to go with at the time, because they were the most credible and over guys. And Angle had really proven up to this point that he was kind of a natural at this. Like, he was so good in that kind of fake babyface role that he was doing. He was so good at it. And he actually had Bob Backlund as his trainer at this point, which is why he wasn't using the ankle lock yet, but he was using the crossface chicken wing as a submission finisher, which I love that hold. I was like, that, I don't know why, that hold just looks brutal. The crossface chicken wing. And I don't know, like, whenever Bob locked it on, it just looks so nasty. But these were the 3 guys that were just perfect to have this match with. The first fall was for the Intercontinental title, and the second fall was for the European title. And I guess I could have done one of these videos about the European title, but I felt like the European title didn't have enough of a presence at WrestleMania to really hold much water. Although, to be fair, I mean, if you look at the lineage of matches that the European title had at WrestleMania, they were pretty solid. At 14, you had Owen and Triple H, which was really good. At 15, you had Shane McMahon and X-Pac, who arguably had the best match on the show. It's either that or Rock and Austin. There's not a whole lot of other competition for the rest of the card, that's for damn sure. At 16, you had this match. At 17, you had Eddie Guerrero versus Test, which on paper doesn't sound that great, and it was solid for what it was. Has probably the funniest botch in the history of WrestleMania, if nothing else. And then at 18, you had Christian and Diamond Dallas Page, and like one of the only good matches Diamond Dallas Page had it in his run in the WWE. So, yeah, you had European title. It definitely had its moments at WrestleMania, and this was one of them. So I'm happy to kind of highlight that at least a little bit. But these were, like I said, these were the top 3 mid-carders at the time for the WWF, with like Eddie and Rikishi kind of hovering around that same level during this point. But the end result of this was a really nice, well-wrestled match between 3 guys that could get it done, and they did a bunch of innovative spots and moves, and it's not the greatest triple threat match of all time, but like I said, for a mid-card level match with the 2 major mid-card championships on the line, and with a unique setup and 3 very talented guys, it delivered pretty well, and I thought overall it was a nice match. Chris Benoit won the Intercontinental title, winning by pinning Chris Jericho after a flying headbutt, and Chris Jericho won the European title, I believe. He did it with the line. He either pinned Benoit or made him submit. I can't remember which. But Jericho walked out with the European title and actually lost it. Again, basing this off memory, I believe Jericho lost it the next night to Eddie Guerrero when China turned on him and they did the whole Latino Heat thing. But just a very nice mid-card championship match on a WrestleMania that was so devoid of anything memorable. It was either shit or boring. It was the name of the game for this particular WrestleMania, but the tag team ladder match and this particular match both stood out and were both really good. So, where did I place this? Number 8, 8th best Intercontinental title match in WrestleMania history. That seems appropriate. Number 9 is William Regal's other opening Intercontinental title match, as he defended the championship against Rob Van Dam at WrestleMania 18, which was the last Intercontinental Championship match for a while, as I highlighted at the start of the video. Just a very nice Intercontinental title match. The major significance of this is that it was Rob Van Dam's first IC title win. It wasn't his first title win in the WWE period because he had won the Hardcore title early upon arrival, but that doesn't really mean anything. I mean, I'm pretty sure my grandmother has a Hardcore title run somewhere. But, this was big for Rob Van Dam. Rob Van Dam was kind of the new flashy kid on the block. It was really the one thing they got from the Invasion angle that kind of stuck around. It was like, this guy's really cool. This guy's really awesome. And he got over pretty quick. And this was a good spot for him, I thought. I thought putting him in the Intercontinental title match at WrestleMania was a nice, natural progression for him after his arrival to the company. And I thought it worked out quite well. I thought his selling and William Regal's hardcore or hard-hitting style of wrestling kind of meshed well together. And, William Regal had actually gotten the title from Edge and done the whole power of the punch thing, so it gave Rob Van Dam some obstacles to overcome, and he did, and he won with the 5-star frog splash and won his first IC title. And overall, I just thought it worked as an opening match, and it worked as an IC title match. It was, unfortunately, the last IC title match for quite a while, which is... Yeah, okay. But number 10, Shawn Michaels versus Tatanka at WrestleMania 9. This one would probably be much higher on the list, like possibly a top 5, if the finish wasn't so odd. And the problem with the finish is that they couldn't decide if Shawn Michaels had gotten counted out or disqualified for hitting the referee. It was very weird. So I don't know if Finkel just fucked up the announcement. I don't know if the ref fucked up. I don't know if Shawn fucked up. I don't know who fucked up, but something got fucked up. And it really left kind of a sour taste in my mouth for this, what was an otherwise really good match that was built up through Tatanka being undefeated and Shawn being the IC champion. So... it was kind of a natural fit because you kind of thought, oh my God, this is the one that Shawn could lose because he's going up against the undefeated guy. And it's kind of a shame that they went with the DQ in this case because it kind of feels like a cheat. It's like, all right, either the title reign's coming to an end or the undefeated guy's going to lose a streak. It's title versus streak. And at the end of the day, we didn't lose either. And it was kind of like, it kind of feels like a cheat. But overall, I thought it was a really nice match. I mean, Tatanka, when put in there with the right guy, could do really well. And I mean, Shawn could get good matches out of anybody. And this was a match that was well on its way to being like the best opener in WrestleMania history up to that point. And it had a lot going for it, and was actually really well wrestled and really well worked. And then they just did that confusing finish, and that kind of pulled the plug on things, unfortunately. So it knocked it down a few pegs, but it's still in the top 10, so that counts for something. Top 10 IC title match of all time in WrestleMania's history. So it was still really good in spite of the odd finish, but what can you do? Number 11, another opener for the Intercontinental title. This one being last year's ladder match. Bad News Barrett defending his championship against Daniel Bryan, Dolph Ziggler, Dean Ambrose, Luke Harper, R-Truth, and Stardust. They just took a bunch of people and just put them in a ladder match. That's basically all there was. And the fact that like Stardust was in this and R-Truth was in this is signs like they were just trying to cram whatever the fuck they could into this. But to be fair, I think the plan was to try and put more emphasis on both the IC and the U.S. titles coming out of this WrestleMania. That's why John Cena won the U.S. title on the same show. They wanted to use John Cena kind of to elevate the U.S. title and make it mean something again. And I think they wanted to do the same thing with Daniel Bryan by having him win the IC title here and then use him and his popularity and his fame to elevate that championship and really make something work with it. Unfortunately, Daniel Bryan's career came to an end, and that wasn't able to materialize. But like I said at the start, the IC title now is in a better place than it was 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, or a decade ago even. So it's better now than it has been in a long time, even though it's still not great. But they have at least somewhat tried to make something of it, which is good. But yeah, this match was, like I said, it was just a ladder match with a bunch of people in it falling off of ladders and doing spots. That's basically all there was to it. But it's Daniel Bryan winning was the best option they could go with, even though he ultimately got hurt. Because otherwise, what would the point have been? It's like, because it's just a bunch of people who are kind of like wavering around in mid-card hell and not really doing much of anything. Even Ambrose at this point was kind of like, they'd already kind of fucked up with him by this point. So they didn't really have a whole lot of good options of who to put the belt on. I guess they could put it on Ziggler for the 80th time, but okay, who cares? And Bad News Barrett was like one of the worst IC champions ever. Through no fault of his own, he lost almost every match on TV. Like, I think he lost like non-title matches to everybody else in this match on TV prior to the pay-per-view. He just looked like complete dog shit as champion, and it's that kind of awful booking that always bugs me, but whatever. But again, it's a ladder match where guys are falling off of things and, killing each other and doing all sorts of crazy crap. So at least it's very spot heavy and very exciting to watch. It may not have all the substance to it, but there is some value to it. And these type of matches aren't always my favorite, but I don't hate them either. So I think middle of the road is a good place to put it on this list. Number 12 from WrestleMania 2, Randy Savage versus George the Animal Steele. I like this match. It's more of a comedy match, but they had the storyline going where George Steele was in love with Elizabeth, which made sense because anybody who looked at Elizabeth back then fell in love with her. It was kind of funny because George was kind of this very cartoonish ape character at this point, and Savage was this complete asshole, dickish, mean boyfriend towards Elizabeth. So it actually made for a nice character clash between the two, and it helps that both of them are completely bonkers. So the match itself was completely bonkers. They broke out, like, they used a bouquet of flowers as a weapon. George the Animal Steele tore open the turnbuckle pad, chewed it open like he always does. It played very cat and mouse style of match with George constantly chasing Savage throughout the match, and Savage went under the ring and came out the other side and attacked him, and they did all sorts of crazy stuff in here. George Steele actually kicked out of the flying elbow drop, which is kind of in the grand scheme of things, I'm like, that's kind of a big deal. Not many people did that. I think Warrior and Hogan are the only other ones that did. But yeah, this match was more comical. The commentary is bad because Susan St. James was on commentary, and she was awful. And let me just say this: if I were doing commentary teams on the best of worst list, believe me when I say like the commentary teams for WrestleMania 2 would be towards the bottom, and that would be Vince McMahon and Susan St. James for the New York portion, and Elvira, Jesse Ventura, and Lord Alfred Hayes for the LA portion were awful. And when I say they were awful, I mean Elvira and Susan St. James were awful. And Elvira was so bad, she made Susan St. James look like an expert at it. It's just, just really, really bad. But I'll cover that more when I talk about Hogan and Bundy in future videos. But, the match itself, though, I thought was fun. And had a storyline purpose to it. Savage got the win when he cheated and put his feet on the ropes for a roll-up and got the hell out of town. And, eventually that would pay off at WrestleMania 3, as I discussed earlier. But overall, it was a nice showcase for Savage. It was a nice excuse to get some laughs and to show off the storyline that they'd done. And it was overall just a fun, entertaining match. Not a whole lot else to say other than that. Number 13 from WrestleMania 14, The Rock versus Ken Shamrock. This is a match that I would imagine if people gave it a star rating, they would probably give it like 1.5 stars or something like that. Because it only went a few minutes and Shamrock basically destroyed The Rock in like 4 or 5 minutes. It was very quick, but star rating, this is where like the star ratings don't tell the whole story, because actually this was booked really, really well, where all the characters involved came off looking like $1 million, and there was character development and story development and all sorts of other things going on. And even though it wasn't like a quote-unquote 4-star classic, it accomplished many other things that were of equal benefit, if not greater benefit. The point of the feud was they'd been feuding for months, Rock and Ken Shamrock. They'd had their title match at the Royal Rumble. They would actually have another match in the King of the Ring finals later that year, where Ken would finally beat Rock after months and months of trying. But here, the idea was that Shamrock could beat Rock easily, because he's a psychotic lunatic that could just murder people whenever he would just snap and lose his temper. He would just, belly-to-belly suplex everybody into oblivion and put on the ankle lock and not let it go and break ankles and all sorts of crazy shit. Ken Shamrock is really one of the unsung heroes of the Attitude Era, because he was phenomenal when he was around. He's a guy that should have been bigger than he ultimately was, and he should have... I would have liked to have seen him go up against Austin in a pay-per-view main event. Unfortunately, that never materialized. But, it's... So you had this babyface Ken Shamrock who could easily beat The Rock if he could just overcome the cheating, which would be outside interference from the Nation, screwy games from The Rock, like the whole brass knuckles thing that he pulled at the Rumble, and also what happened in this match where Shamrock went so crazy and went so overboard where he made Rock tap out to the ankle lock, but he wouldn't let it go, and he wouldn't let it go, and he wouldn't let it go, and that led to another great moment where Farouk came out and looked like he was going to help The Rock, but they'd been having problems because they were in the Nation of Domination together, and Rock was kind of starting to move past Farouk and show signs that he wanted to take over the Nation, so Farouk was starting to not like him very much. And then you get to this moment where Farouk's going to go help The Rock, and then he's like, nah, and he just walks off, and he just leaves The Rock high and dry, and I'm like, holy shit, that was fucking great. And that eventually leads to the Nation siding with The Rock and kicking Farouk, the creator of the group, out of the group. That was all great. And again, it set up stories for later, it set up character development, set up other things. There's a lot more going on here. It's very multi-layered and very well crafted. And Shamrock went so crazy and so bananas that he started belly-to-belly suplexing referees, and eventually it was decided that the decision would be overturned and that Rock would be the winner via disqualification, would ultimately keep the Intercontinental title. And Ken was really his own worst enemy here. And again, great stuff all around, and it was a great way to keep the belt on Rock. And that's one of the things I don't understand about The Rock, especially nowadays, where I've had people tell me, it's like, oh, Rock is the only one credible enough to beat Brock Lesnar. And I'm like, okay. I don't know how Rock got this reputation for being a super unbeatable killer, but Rock, okay, when he was a heel, he was a chicken shit weasel that got his ass kicked all the time and would always win through, like, cheap-ass means like this, where he didn't really... He won the match by doing absolutely nothing. As, like, Ken basically beat himself. Or when he was a babyface, he would lose. Like, he was never like a Hulk Hogan or a Warrior or a John Cena or an Undertaker or something like that where he won all the time. Rock lost quite a bit. So this idea that Rock is this unbeatable super killer, I was like, nah, he never really was that. But I don't know how that reputation started, but okay. But yeah, I like my Rock as a quippy, sarcastic heel that gets his ass kicked. I mean, that's the best Rock. And really, he was really fully into that role at this point and was doing great at it. And I thought the way they booked this match was really stellar and very, very good. Even though, again, it was only a few minutes long, not going to get high star ratings, but they accomplished so much from a character and story standpoint that it worked in a completely different way and definitely contributed to the show. And contributed to Rock in a lot of ways, because it allowed him to eventually take over the nation and continue as IC champion, continue going into the feud with Triple H, and set up a rematch between Rock and Shamrock in the King of the Ring finals, and blah, 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 all sorts of other things going on. So, yeah, for just 4 or 5 minutes, they accomplished a lot in that time, and it was very good, and I really liked it. And if that level of detail was the norm for wrestling shows, I mean, we'd be in a much better place now, but unfortunately, we're almost never in that place. So, yeah, what can you do? Number 14, Jeff Jarrett versus Razor Ramon from WrestleMania 11, a rematch from the Royal Rumble earlier that year where Jeff Jarrett injured Razor Ramon's leg and used it to secure the championship. This was the rematch. Razor Ramon had 1-2-3 Kid in his corner, and Jeff Jarrett had the Road Dogg Jesse James, who at this point was known as the Roadie. Yeah, what to say about this match? First of all, I hate WrestleMania 11 with an unmitigated passion. I hate this show so much. It is unquestionably the worst WrestleMania of all time in my eyes. This is one of the only matches, if not the only match, that is somewhat bearable to watch. The problem with it is that if you've seen one Jeff Jarrett Razor Ramon match, you've seen them all, because whenever they worked with each other, they had the same fucking match. He's like, yep, he's going to work over the knee, and that's going to be your match. And that's basically it. It also doesn't help that the match ended on a disqualification, which, again, is kind of a... Sometimes DQs are helpful. I'll actually point out an instance later in this list where a DQ would have been very helpful. But this was a point where I was like, that just added to the cheapness of this particular WrestleMania, where it's like, yeah, and all the shit going on in the show, we also get a DQ finish in one of the title matches. It's like, the show, it just sucks. But... as a match, it's not that bad. It's bearable to watch. And it's one of the only matches on the show that I can say that about. So for that, I'll give it some props. There you go. Number 15 from WrestleMania 1, Greg Valentine versus the Junkyard Dog. I talked about it with Tito versus the Executioner from the opening matches video. The IC title match for the show should have been Tito versus Greg. But they wanted to save it for later, and they used WrestleMania more as kind of an infomercial to kind of sell people on the product and bring eyeballs to the product, and then promise things like Tito and Greg later on to kind of keep them coming back. So that's why we didn't get that match at this WrestleMania. But the feud was going on at the time, and Tito actually played a big role in the finish of this match. The match itself was okay. It was kind of a hard-hitting stiff fest. JYD was always kind of a limited guy. Dude with a lot of charisma, not much in the ways of ability, but the charisma made up for it. And if you put him in there with somebody like a Greg Valentine, you can get something okay out of him. Greg Valentine got the win by doing a cheap roll-up, but then Tito Santana came out and told the referee that Valentine cheated, so the referee elected to restart the match, and Valentine said, fuck that, and he just walked out and got himself counted out and saved his Intercontinental title that way. So JYD was the winner, but did not win the title. Now, problem, why the fuck would the referee listen to Tito Santana about Valentine cheating? I'm like, wait a minute, can you do that? It's like, I mean, I'm not saying Tito's not a trustworthy guy, but at this point it's like, I kind of like the rule of if you don't see it, you don't call it. You can't see it if you didn't call it. You can't call it if you didn't see it. And why the fuck would he listen to Tito in this instance? I have no idea. It really doesn't make much sense for me, especially now when I look back on it. But whatever. I mean, the match was okay. It was what it was. That's basically all there is. Valentine kept the belt, which was necessary to continue the feud with Tito Santana later in 1985. And JYD was a very charismatic guy, so the fans in attendance were very much into this match. JYD was one of those guys that had so much charisma and was so over he didn't really need a belt. But overall, the match, again, it was okay. It was a perfectly okay, serviceable match. Not a whole lot else to say other than that. Number 16 was a match that completely pissed me off. Cody Rhodes versus The Big Show at WrestleMania 28. This match probably pissed me off more than the Daniel Bryan Sheamus match. That match at least had a comical element to it where it was like, oh my god, I cannot believe they did this. And the fans reacted so negatively to it that the negativity was kind of hilarious all its own. This one pissed me off though because they had something with Cody. I mean, they had it. He'd been the Intercontinental Champion. He was having a really long reign. And he was starting to blossom as a character again. And I'll talk about that in a bit. But he'd been doing this bit where he was making fun of Big Show for all of Big Show's failures at WrestleMania and really getting heat on himself here. It's like, wow, I think they've got something with Cody. I think they need to continue running with him as IC champion and see how much they can get out of this. And I'm like, Big Show's not the guy to be taking the IC title from. And it's like, it would have been like Bossman taking the IC title from Perfect, but actually much worse because Big Show is so far past the point of relevance at this stage that it's like it just seems even dumber to do it. But Cody, he seemed to be doing really well and was blossoming, and I'm like, all right, if I had to book this match, this is where the DQ finish would actually be helpful. You built up all this heat on Cody at Big Show's expense. Okay. Cody gets himself disqualified or wins in some fluky bullshit way, whatever you do. Big Show snaps, beats the crap out of him, chokeslams him through a table after the match. So at least you get the face saves face by beating the ever-living crap out of the guy who cheated him out of a title victory. And Cody gets to keep the title to live another day and ultimately continue this really good reign they've got going. They elected not to do that. They had Big Show win the Intercontinental title at WrestleMania, give him his WrestleMania moment, which nobody remembers. And you hurt Cody Rhodes in the long run, and you flushed his reign down the tubes. Although the next month at Extreme Rules, they would have a table match that was booked pretty much exactly how the WrestleMania match should have been, where Cody won in a really cheap way, and Big Show snapped and just chokeslammed him through like 3 or 4 tables. And it was like, yeah, that's how the Mania match should have gone. But they didn't want to do that because fuck you, that's why. But yeah, for all the talk that Vince McMahon says about grabbing the brass ring and guys need to do that or whatever, I'm like, Cody Rhodes, I look at him and I see a guy who's been given opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. He usually succeeds with it, usually gets over, whether it be with Legacy or with dashing Cody Rhodes or undashing Cody Rhodes or this Intercontinental title run or the early days of Stardust or the whole run where he feuded with Randy Orton and went against the Authority and he did the whole tag team with Dustin. All the things that he's done, and he typically does really, really well, and then for whatever reason they pull the rug out from under him, and somehow that's his fault. It's his fault that Stardust is going nowhere now, even though he initially got it over. It's his fault that, dashing Cody Rhodes failed or whatever, even though he played that character to the hilt and did the best he could with it. I see a guy who puts 110% into everything that he's given, into every single fucking thing that he's given, and they keep yanking the rug out from under him, and I keep hearing about the fucking brass ring and all that bullshit. And I was like, well, what the fuck has Cody Rhodes done wrong? Please tell me, because I see a guy who's literally done everything that's ever been asked of him, typically does well with it, and then you screw him over anyway. I don't get it. This match should be lower on the list, but the other ones after it are so bad that it's just, they just really are that bad. But this one just angered me. This one just pure ignorance on the WWE's part to do it this way. Just pure and utter ignorance. To have Big Show. And yeah, Big Show won the title, beat him with, it was either the chokeslam or the WMD. I don't remember. I don't really care. I just remember being angry. And I knew it was coming too. That was the other thing. It's like, Big Show's going to win the fucking belt because they can't run with a guy. They cannot run with a guy. And they fucked him over and ruined everything, and we're not allowed to have nice things, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine, whatever. Okay, number 17, from WrestleMania 25, JBL versus Rey Mysterio, the match that lasted 30 seconds. 30-second matches and doing these quick title changes can work. It worked with Orlando Jordan and Chris Benoit at SummerSlam 2005. I was there. Got a huge pop. It worked at SummerSlam 88 when Warrior beat Honky Tonk for the belt. Sometimes it can really, really work. This time it didn't really work because the title meant nothing. Nobody cared that JBL was champion. Nobody cared that Rey was facing him. Nobody cared. There was no reason to care. There was just two guys put into a spot, into a match that nobody really cared about. And when JBL came out and started cutting that huge promo about how he was going to humiliate Rey and do all this other stuff, and he just went inordinately long with it, I was like, he's going to lose in like 10 seconds. And sure enough, it played out exactly how I thought it would. And pointless would be the best way to describe this. Just completely pointless. Didn't do anything for the Intercontinental title. Didn't do anything for the guys involved. JBL actually retired immediately afterwards, so I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. I don't really care. But yeah, it was just a pointless thing. That's really all there was to it. It wasn't the most offensive thing ever, but it was so little effort being put into the IC title that it makes you wonder why they even bothered putting it onto the card in the first place. So whatever. Moving right along from there. WrestleMania 13, my favorite one, at spot 18. Rocky Maivia versus the Sultan. Now, you see the difference between The Rock at WrestleMania 14 and what he was like the year before at WrestleMania 13. It's almost staggering because Rocky Maivia sucked. Rocky Maivia was fucking terrible. And this, like, happy-go-lucky idiot blue chipper with stupid-looking outfit, and it was Rocky Johnson's son. We had to listen to that over and over again. Rocky Johnson actually made an appearance post-match to help Rock beat off. Yeah, nice choice of words on my part. But help him fight off Iron Sheik and Bob Backlund and the Sultan and all that other shit. Yeah, Honky Tonk Man on commentary for this and talking about what the IC title means to him and how Rocky isn't a good IC champion and he was obnoxious. And you had the babyface that everybody hated with the Rocky Sucks chants with Rocky Maivia, and he was the champion. And you had the Sultan being played by Rikishi or Fatu or whatever name you want to give him, but he was playing the role here, and he basically looked like Bane from The Dark Knight Rises, except red and shitty. And that's basically what the Sultan was. He was just a shitty gimmick that seemed like out of place in that particular time period, and I'm like, shit, this is the IC title match? Seriously? Fucking hell. I mean, this was, I've said it before, WrestleMania 13 is a real indicator of a major down period, like the ultimate low for the WWF. This show was one submission match, like one of the greatest matches of all time, away from being unquestionably the worst WrestleMania ever. And yeah, this match was bad. It was just a bad match between two shitty characters that nobody cared about and two talents that nobody cared about at the time. And it's really amazing that Rocky's career could be salvaged after this. It really was. But like I said, if you look at him at WrestleMania 13, you look at him at WrestleMania 14, the change is almost like night and day. But here, Rocky Maivia did not work. He ultimately won the match with a top rope flying crossbody. Nobody cared. Nobody cared. I was just happy that the match was over, quite honestly. But I've already talked about this match more than it deserves. So moving right along to number 19. I mentioned the Honky Tonk Man earlier. Excuse me. The Honky Tonk Man defending against Brutus the Barber Beefcake at WrestleMania 4. Honky Tonk Man was the longest reigning Intercontinental Champion of all time, so it's appropriate that he would have a title match in WrestleMania's history. This match was not very good. It was trying to be more of a comedy match, but it didn't really work. Some of the bells and whistles that they threw out there, like Peggy Sue being played by Sherry Martel, that didn't really work for me. Some of the antics with, the barber going around cutting Jimmy's hair and doing all sorts of other things, it was like, whatever. It felt like a match that was going for laughs, and it didn't really succeed in doing that. It was just kind of a throwaway goofball match. Which goofball matches work. I mean, Savage and Animal Steel worked for me, but this one just kind of felt like a throwaway, and it was like, whatever. Beefcake was actually supposed to face Honky Tonk at SummerSlam later that year in a rematch, but that didn't happen because Brutus got hurt, and Warrior had to take his place. And I think we're better off for it. But overall, this match just failed to impress. didn't really show off the strengths of either guy, except for the fact that Honky Tonk was able to worm away with the title again by getting intentionally disqualified when Jimmy Hart jumped into the ring and knocked the referee out with the megaphone, which is actually kind of interesting. You normally don't see that. Normally they try to break up the pin itself. To see Jimmy actually attack the referee is actually kind of funny. But overall, this match not very good. Just not a good one. Just not a good one. And it's unfortunate because, like I said, it's the longest Intercontinental title reign of all time, and you would hope for it to have something a little bit better. And the disappointment is even enhanced when you look at what we got the year before at WrestleMania 3. So how we go from Savage Steamboat to this is kind of staggering. But in any case, this was not a very good IC title match, and it's unfortunate. But it's not the worst one. The worst one goes to number 20. From WrestleMania 15, the Elimination Fatal 4-Way between Road Dogg Jesse James, the champion, Goldust, Ken Shamrock, and Val Venus. I talked about it in the opening match video where I said that the Outlaw switch, by switching Billy Gunn and Road Dogg in the two title matches, really hurt both of those title matches. And it was felt even more in this one because you actually had a really well-crafted storyline here with Billy Gunn pursuing the Intercontinental title, but all these other components getting in the way. Shamrock was the champion, but you had Val Venus getting in the way, and he was having an affair with Ken Shamrock's sister Ryan, and she eventually got tied in with Goldust at some point after Venus dumped her, and all these other things. So you had all these working components and all these different things going on that got all four men to this point. And then they switched the Outlaws, and Road Dogg got inserted into this, and it kind of threw the entire storyline out of whack and just ruined everything that they'd built. And I know Russo did it because he wanted to keep us on our toes and, keep us guessing and shock us. But to me, it's there's a difference between expecting something and wanting something, and the people wanted Billy Gunn to win the IC title. That was the thing. He was mad over at that point, and they'd actually given the fans something to root for and to cheer for, and that was Billy Gunn winning the IC title. And they threw all that away by having him randomly win the Hardcore title, and which was Road Dogg's title. That was the one that Road Dogg held, and then it got taken away from him due to injury, so he had to pursue that title and get that one back. So it threw both storylines completely out of whack and ruined two title matches at WrestleMania, and the end result was a clunky, boring, uninteresting, awkward four-way title match that was, like I said, it was awkwardly put together. Road Dogg just kept the title at the end, so it was whatever. Nobody really cared. Shamrock and Venus got eliminated through a double countout. That was very out of nowhere and random and, again, very awkward. This was a very weirdly put together match. And like I said, when you lose the dramatic element of the guy who we wanted to win the IC title, which was Billy Gunn, it threw the entire story out of whack and just completely ruined it and made this match completely uninteresting and made it the worst IC title match in WrestleMania history, at least for my money. But that concludes the best to worst for the Intercontinental Championship. But tune in next time where I will be talking about the best to worst in WrestleMania's Tag Team Championship matches. So stay tuned for more.